that's what you got to do, which is, start all over again, begin again. You set out some goals for yourself when you were young. You had your whole life in front of you, years and years and years. Remember what it was like when you were young? In your early 20s, and thinking of somebody being the age of 50 was like grandpa. You couldn't wrap your head around being that old. You thought, man, when you're that old, life is over. Well, I've blazed past the age of 50 a few years ago, and let me tell you something, life ain't over, and you ain't no grandpa, okay? And so there's plenty of time. And so for me, every day is about beginning again. For me, every single day, I'm starting all over. Every single day, I begin again. Because I don't want to look at my everyday as being the last day. I don't want to look at my everyday as being, oh man, it's almost over. No, man, we're just getting started. There's still so much more to live, do, and be, and I don't want to be guilty of demeaning the days that I have right now. I don't want to be guilty of damning with faint praise my tomorrow, right? My tomorrow. I'm excited about my tomorrow. I'm excited about the possibilities of tomorrow because there's so much more to live. There's so much more to do and be. There's so much more to achieve. I still have a vision of life that I want to live. I still have certain goals that I want to achieve. There are certain very real things in different areas of my life that I still want to achieve results in. I'm not resting on my laurels. I'm not sitting back and letting life go by. I'm not going to accept mediocrity because I would hate to live with regret. I would just hate that. I want to be able to be on my last day and say, man, I gave it all, right? I gave a lot. Even if you can't say that you gave it all, say, man, I gave a hell of a lot. You might say, look back and say, oh man, when I reached the age of 50, I remember hearing that video and making that decision that I'm going to take these old hobbies and things and goals off the dusty shelf and get back to living some semblance of the life that I always wanted. And from that day until the last day, I did it. I pushed for it. I went after it. Man, you will not live with regret if you do that. You won't remember about the years. You won't be complaining about the fact that you didn't do much from the age 35 to 50. You'll say, man, at the age of 50, I turned and burned. I made a decision at that time. My life was not over yet, and I'm going to give myself for myself. And that's the meaning of sacrifice, giving yourself for yourself. And that's the ultimate commitment. That's the price that you have to pay. It's your life for your life. It's the life that you have, giving up for the life that you can possibly be and live and do. You got to do that. You're worth it. Your dreams are worth it. Your goals are worth it. Do you have enough value for yourself and your resident potential? Do you have enough value for it? Because if you're not doing something about it, then how much do you really value it? Right? How much do you really value it if you're not doing something to preserve it, to take care of it? Granted, I understand there are certain limitations, right? I'm speaking in general terms. Everybody's circumstances and situations are different, right? So different rules apply, but that's your job. Okay, it's not my job. My job is to share the principles. Your job is to sit in judgment over your own life and determine what can be applied. I just don't want you to hold yourself back. I just don't want you to limit your thinking. I want you to think that, no, okay, let me stretch myself. Because more often than not, when we contemplate our own lives, we're not thinking big enough. It's true. More often than not, when we think about our own lives, we are not thinking big enough. We're thinking still too small. And again, doesn't matter how old you are. Doesn't matter how old you are. You'd be amazed at what you're capable of. You'd be amazed what potential you have. So much personal power that you have bottled up inside of you, waiting to be expressed, waiting to manifest, waiting to come out whenever you decide to make that choice to say, I am going to fulfill what I set out for myself. I am not too old. I am still able. I can do this. Well, do you believe that? Because if you don't believe it, it's not going to happen. That's always that first step, is believing, right? Awareness, And when it's talking about a negative thing, they'll say, if you got to first admit that there's a problem before you can get over it. True. If you don't recognize that what you're dealing with is actually a problem, then you're not going to do anything to change it. So the first step is to admit you have a problem. Well, let's reverse that, right? The first step is to admit that it's possible. The first step is to admit that you have the potential. The first step is to admit it's not too late. Because if you can't admit that, if you can't acknowledge that, well, then there's no way you're ever going to move on it. Can you dig it? I hope you can.